Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Beyond the Basics UAC Tips and Tricks webinar. I'm Lauren Tansini, and I'll be your moderator today. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the Q&A panel on the right, and we will answer them at the end of the session. Our presenter today is Colin Coxidge, Director of Product Management. Colin, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Hey, everyone. So today we thought we'd cover a number of topics which may be new or may not be new to the audience, but we kind of figured that we wanted to go through some of the things that we know are useful in the product, but potentially you may or may not already know about. And in fact, what we'd like to do, and we have a survey at the end, which we'd appreciate if you'd spend the time to fill out, but that also covers very much a question in there, which we'd really like you to answer is, if you're an advanced user of the product or been using it for a while, what are the things that you wish you'd known when you first started using the product? Because I think this, tips and tricks thing is probably going to turn into a series. We already have much more content than we're going to do today that we've sort of thought about on there. But anyway, let's kind of get into the meat of this, and we're going to go through kind of 7 different areas. Some of these cover more than one thing, but very much things that we think may well be useful and interesting as you go through as an advanced user of the product and sit there. So we're going to start with some of the preferences and setup in terms of how you organize your environment and things that you can do that may make your daily tasks a little easier. Okay, so we're going to cut to the product. So one of the things you'll notice here is that I have a customized banner car, and out of the box, that's not there. And that was something that we had and then reintroduced, and kind of wanted to cover to make sure that people are aware of some of the things that you can do with that banner in order to identify the different environments that you may be running when you have them open in your browser. So if we go to the properties, and another quick tip here is the properties is searchable. If we just type what we want to search for and press enter, it brings us to the items that we have. So you can see that I've already entered a color. You can have any color you want, so that can match your corporate branding if that's what you want. But you can also have a logo, and that logo can have a URL, which can take you to another website. That could be your corporate website. That could be an internal documentation website that you have for how to use the product in your environment. So we can kind of look at what we have there. Now, on the banner logo, refer to the documentation, but effectively there's a location that we have available that you can put images in, and the documentation discusses the requirements for that image, and also how to set that up and do that. But I have that already pre-set up, so we just need to enter that and a URL, which is to an internal wiki site that we have. So if I save those and then go ahead and refresh, so that we pick up those changes in the UI, we'll see when it gets around to refreshing that we've added a small logo here. And if I click on that logo, then it takes me to that internal, in our case, our product management Confluence page there. So we have that capability. Okay. So another thing that users may or may not be aware of is there are a number of user preferences, which I encourage users to review. But one of the things that we introduced a couple of releases ago was the dashboard, or shall we say the theme that we have here, and there's a number of controls around that. So we have a light mode, which is what I use by default, but we also have a dark mode, which is popular with some users, and we can select that. And we can also have the density, depending on what screen resolution we have. We can basically have it very densely, get more information on the screen or get less information on the screen, depending on your screen resolution. So there are a number of standard settings that you can select for that. So we can go ahead and do that. You can also set these, you'll notice they say system default. These can be set as properties so that the defaults for users can be whatever your preference is. but we can go ahead and change that as we need. So for those that haven't seen it, we'll take a quick look at the dark mode. I will switch it back because I personally prefer not to use the dark mode. So it automatically refreshes the screen for me. We can see that we then have the dark mode available there. I'm just going to switch that back to the system default, which on my system is the light system. There we go. Okay. All right. So one of the things that we find is a useful option. Obviously, most users use the activity monitor, and by default, out of the box, when you set the activity monitor and go to activity, you actually get a little start icon, which you have to press, and you can control that to do what I have here, where it starts it automatically in the user preferences. And that's the activity monitor automatically, which by default is set to no, but if you set that to yes, it'll do what mine just did and go straight into that display. You don't have that extra click. You can get around that. So one of the things that there's a lot of controls around how we use the product in terms of the tabs. It's a tab orientated user interface. So when we click on things, new things pop up. Let's say if I go into open workflows, we get a new tab here. And we have a number of controls that talk about how these operate. Okay, so if I right click on any tab, you'll see there's a number of different options I have where I can pin those tabs, or I can automatically open those tabs. So if we look at setting this one to be an automatic tab, you'll notice that when I refresh it, in other words, when I log on, it'll actually open that tab automatically. So if there are certain things that you always do, I personally have the activity tab always open. The dashboards tab is set by default. That will always come on. But if you want to have the activity and certain other tabs open, you can do that automatically by using that option. And you can also control with this what happens when you open a new tab. There are some tabs that are pinned automatically, and it's based on the kind of tabs there are. So for example, if we go into some of the reports on the widgets on the dashboards and we display those, these are pinned automatically. But other tabs then where you'll find that what it will do is it potentially will overwrite that tab, or it will create a new tab. So you control that default with the with your user preferences there. So basically you can pin tabs automatically. I have that set to yes, which means that it opens a new tab every time I click on an option, unless that tab's already open, in which case that tab becomes the focus tab. By default, that's set to no, which means that it'll overwrite certain tabs if you want to. And you have the option when you open tabs to do a right click. Let's get out of this and open a new tab, okay, as opposed to just open it. So if you click on it, it opens it. If you have that property set to no, it'll override an unpinned tab, or you can have it to do that. So it's kind of your preference as to how you prefer to work with the product. Pros and cons to both in terms of that. It saves you having to close tabs if you have that set not to do that. Okay. So if we get into something like looking at the workflow task, what we call the list detail views here, there are a couple of options here that may well be useful. What we're seeing is that by default, we have a list and then we have the detail screen. And obviously when I select something from the list, it populates that default screen. Okay, we have the option to set that so that we see just the list, and then we can click on an item and have that pop up in a window, or we can right click on it and open it in its own tab to view it that way. And we can control whether this happens automatically again with the user preferences here. And this is the expand lists automatically option, which I have set to no. But if we set that to yes, And again, that can be controlled by a system default, so you can make that do whatever you think your users are going to prefer. And then if we close that and open that tab again, you'll see that it has this view here as the default, and you can minimize that and have both if you want to. Okay. So having the screen here, and of course you can expand the detail view if you want to as well. Okay. But having this here, you'll notice that the tabs tend to be more tabs. Depends on the definition type as to what's available, but there tends to be more tabs than you have room for. So scrolling right across them can be a little bit of a chore, but these tabs are basically, and if I select something so that they become active, are customizable. I can drag these and basically order them in whatever order I want. So the tabs that I use more commonly, I can have in the default view. Okay, so in this case, I put the versions here so that I can access that without having to scroll to the right. And that's persisted across sessions, so you can do that. So personally, I prefer to have the instances there. That's a tab that I use very commonly, and by default, that's off to the right. So you have that capability to do that. Okay. One other thing when you come into these lists is that, you know, we have the option to do filters, and something that we introduced relatively recently in one of the last couple of releases was the ability to create a global filter rather than having to create a filter. So I can create a filter here that's visible to me, or I can create a filter that's visible to everyone. And when I save that, that's available in this list. So it will be available in just workflow tasks. But there are some filters that would be common to all definition types. For example, if I wanted to filter on a specific business service, or if I wanted to filter on things that I've created, or I wanted to filter by a specific name filter, those kind of filters would be available to all records. So rather than having to create a filter for each list that I use, I can create a global filter. And if we go through the services menu here, we'll be able to see that. And if we come down to go to filters here, okay, we have the ability then through the filter to create a new filter. And by default, that filter is global. And I can create a global filter for everyone if I want to. So and so basically, I can look at all records that are created by me and have that as a filter if I want to. So we can create that. I've created that new filter. Now I can open any list and we'll basically see that filter appear in the list, and I can select that filter there. So that gives me the ability to avoid having to create multiple filters. I can create one that does everything that I need it to do and use that globally across that. And we can do that for all of the users if we want to. Okay. So one of the things that we have here is in the way that the UI works, a lot of the screens are basically what we call virtual pages, which means that not all the data is fetched. If the data goes across more than one screen, not all the data is fetched at any one time. So, you know, we know that we can do multiple selects to do commands against groups of options if they support that, and I'll do a more sensible selection. For example, we select all the things that are held here. It would give me the option to force finish them, which would be a valid action against those if I wanted to. But if I wanted to do that across definitions that are more than one page, I'd have to go on page to the next page and select options and do that. So if I have a filter that I apply to this, and let's see, we got one that's valid. Pipeline, here we go. If this was across multiple pages, I have the option to run commands against filtered. He said, not option here. Okay, yeah, sorry, from right-clicking on here, I have the ability to run command on filtered, and that's clicking on the tab. You'll see there's subtly different options there. So now I have all these different options that I have that I can run against everything, regardless of whether it's one page or not. Okay. The other thing, if we do a right-click on the header here, is I also have the ability to control the data that's displayed, and that's true for any of the forms. So we have the columns option here, which shows me what's displayed. I can change the order. So if I want to put the status before the type, I can do that. If I want to add different options in here, I can do that, and I can drag that up, put that there. So I can basically have a customized display that shows me everything that I need to know regarding the workflow in any of the lists there. Okay, so it gives you all of the available information, and you can do that. Okay. So something else we have here is the ability to control what dashboards we see. With the dashboard visibility, admins can create dashboards that are available for lots of users, and we can control for these dashboards whether we have the ability to show them or not. So somebody may have set up a dashboard called Automation View, which I may or may not be interested in viewing, but I have the ability then to control whether I show or hide that by default. So there may be dashboards that are available to me that I'm just not interested in. So if I have a lot of those in the dashboard tab view, I can set them to be hidden by default. I can always come back to this view and reset them if I want to, if I decide later that I want to utilize that dashboard, but it gives me that capability to control which dashboards I have in there. Okay. So one other property that I want to quickly talk about, and the usefulness of this will become apparent in one of the features that I'm going to display later. And that's a little one called expose. There's actually two here, expose resolve script and expose UDM script, okay? So when you're running tasks that have scripts, by default in the task instance, you don't see the resolve script. You can set that so that you do. So basically when that task runs, you see the script as part of the output for that task, and you see any resolutions for it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that is a useful one to review, because that may be something that you want to take advantage of, and we'll see the benefits of that as we get into one of the other things that I'm going to highlight here. Okay, so that's some of the preferences and personalizations. There are a lot, and we encourage users to from an administration point of view, review the properties to make sure that the environment's set for your optimally for your configuration, and also for users as well to review those and look and see what makes sense for you. But there are a couple of common ones that we know that customers, and certainly I as a user of the product, take the time to personalize and change in my environment. Okay. So something else that's an option that has been around for a little while, I'm not sure how widely used it is, but I think it's a very useful option, is we provided the capability to have a URL that goes directly to a specific screen within the product. So there are a number of things that we can do. We can open a definition. We can open an instance. We can open a workflow. We can open a workflow instance, or we can open a report, run a report and see the report roles via a URL. Now, the documentation covers this in full, but for the sample I have here, I have a specific URL with my, my controller URL with the action to say open workflow and type equals exec, which means I want to see the instance. And then we populate the sysid, right? This is very useful for notifications. So whether you're doing an email notification or whether you're doing other kinds of notification, you have the information available to generate this URL as part of that notification. And I have a little example here to kind of show you some of the things you can do there. In my instance, I'm actually going to send a notification to a Slack chat channel and have a little button in there, which basically is going to open the workflow. And if we look at that, I'm doing that very simply with a web service task that I have that I call backup notification. I run a backup of this system once a week, and I want to make sure that it runs. I want to get a notification if it fails there. So if we go ahead and open this definition, we'll open in its own tab. Okay, this just takes advantage of some capabilities that Slack does. And now there's a number of different ways to do this. You can do this to other chat engines as well. Most of them seem to support the same capabilities. You know, Teams does, where they have basically an inbound API or webhook that allows us to send information to a chat channel. Okay, so I've configured that in mine. This is the basically the ID for that webhook for the channel that I have available. And then I'm just sending in a payload. And in their case, it's just some JSON input that allows me to describe what I want to do. They use basically a markdown language. But the key thing here is that I can create a button. And in that button, I can pass in a URL. And I'm extracting from the tasks that gets an event notification, the sysid or the UUID of the parent workflow, because I want to go directly to the workflow rather than the task that's failed in this case. So, and again, the details of that will vary depending on what your environment is, but it gives you an idea of the usefulness of what we call the action URLs and how to generate those and use those in there. So if I go ahead and effectively run that workflow, and I'm going to do it from the trigger here because I have the backup trigger here. If I just go ahead and trigger that now, my weekly backup, I should get a notification for that. And we'll go to the activity here. Oh yeah, we've got to take the filter off. That's why I'm not seeing it. There we go. Okay, so we've got an issue, and basically, if we go in and look at my Slack channel here, we'll see that here today, 10:22, I've got a new notification saying, oops, my backup has problems, okay? So if I'm not already logged in, I don't have to go and navigate to this. I can purely just click on that link that I provided within that chat channel. And that takes me directly to this. So now I can take whatever action I want. Okay, I can see it's undeliverable, so the agent's not available. We'll go and resolve that, and then everything will be fine and good there. But yeah, just an example of how you can use that. You know, certainly recommend thinking about using that if you're using email notifications. If you are doing notifications to, you know, Slack or Google Chat or Microsoft Teams or other ones, you know, you can do this via the integration tasks that we provide, or you can do it very simply in most cases with a web service task, as I've kind of done here in terms of that. So, all right, on to the next one. Okay, so something that may be a subtly hidden option, there's reasons why it's not necessarily front and center, is the ability to create a new task directly from within the workflow editor. So the original concept was that you had tasks, you created a task, and once all the tasks existed, you could create a workflow and bring all those tasks in to execute them in a certain order with a specific flow. Okay, but a lot of users kind of think of it from the process that they create the workflow and then think about what tasks they want to put in it, and those tasks may not already exist. So we've added the capability some time ago to allow you to approach it from that angle. However, if we go ahead and go to workflows, and we'll just create a new workflow. Okay, we'll save that workflow and we'll go into edit it to create tasks. So all of the controls I have here for things I can do with the workflow, you'll notice that there isn't one to say new. That's a right-click option. And the reason that's a right-click option is we need a context as to where to insert the new task. So where I clicked is where the new task will go. So as you're building out that workflow, you'll click where you want the new task to go, and then you can click new task. What kind of task do I want to create? Okay, so we can go ahead and create a manual task. Okay, fill out all the things we need to do, and when we're ready there, we click it and it drops it where I clicked. Okay, and now I can go ahead and say, all right, okay, I want another new task, and we can go ahead and we'll create a timer task. And we'll time that 10 seconds. And then when we save that, that drops that in the workflow. And then I can use the controls to join those together. So we can do everything now in terms of that from within the workflow editor construct itself, which gives us, a different way of working with workflows, which I think is potentially more intuitive with the way that users think about building these, because you don't necessarily want to plan out everything in advance. You kind of know what you want to do. You want to start with the workflow and then bring the tasks in, whether that's adding existing tasks or whether that's creating new tasks that meet your requirements there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that, and we can close that. Similarly, we can also interact with active workflows in terms of doing the same thing. And again, similar concept that we can have a workflow that's running and we can say, oh, we need to insert a task here. This workflow scheduled and running, it's not started yet. We've had a request in, we need to insert a task in as a one-off for this instance. We can go ahead and do that. And again, if we go to the activity, we'll see that I actually have some workflows already running. And we'll go ahead and we'll do this guy. So we'll view the workflow. So we've got the workflow monitor here. I've held this workflow purely so that it's sat there for the purposes of this demo. But they can be in any status that we have here. So let's say that we want to insert a manual task into before one of the tasks here. Again, if we go ahead and click, we'll see that we've got insert task. And again, that's so that we have the context of where to insert it. Because if you have a very large workflow and we just drop it anywhere, then you've got to pick it up and move it. It becomes tricky. So putting it exactly where you're clicking it, we've got some context there to do that. So if we just go ahead and search for the manual task, we can have the one that I just created. We can pick it up. We can drop it in. Okay. Then we have a situation, it pops up another window, is what are its predecessors and successors? So we can't just drop the task in there and let you draw lines, because if we do that, this is the active instance. What will happen is if I don't have a predecessor, it potentially will start to run immediately. Okay. So we need to select a predecessor and potentially a successor for it. So we need to drop it in with its dependencies, which is why we pop up this dialog here. So we're going to select the predecessor as the monitor, and we'll select the successor as the deploy ETL there. Okay. And we go ahead and add it in, and it's put that there within that context and added it where I wanted it, where I needed it. Okay. So the next one is one of the things that is useful and powerful, or one of the good things about the controller and the UAC product, is that there's often more than one way to achieve the same goal. That consequently can also be one of the less good things about the product, because there's more than one way to achieve the same goal. But one of the examples of that is that if I have a task and I've just created and I want to trigger it, so we'll go ahead at the workflow task and we'll have the task that we've the workflow that we just created, and we'll do. I didn't create it with demos. Demo workflow here. This workflow here that I've just created, that we have here, is that we'll notice that I could then go, if I want to schedule this, I can go off and I can go and find the triggers menu, and I can go and find the specific trigger I want, and I can create the trigger, and then I can reference it to the workflow. It's a number of different steps, okay? But within the definition, we have a tab called triggers. So I can see what triggers exist for this, but if there aren't any ones existing, I can do it directly from here. A couple of advantages to that. And if I click new here and say I want to create a time trigger in this case, okay, it's going to pop up the dialog to create that. First of all, it automatically generates a name for me. Don't have to use that. I can overwrite that, but we add the trigger at the end. So that kind of makes sense, and that meets a reasonable naming standard, that I have a trigger that references a workflow. They have the same name. I can see which one's the trigger. I can see which one's the workflow. Nice and easy there. Plus, it's automatically dropped the task in. So effectively, all I really have to do is to say that I want to run this on, business days at 8 a.m. Okay, so it simplifies the process of creating the trigger for that task, just by the fact that by doing it from within the task definition triggers tab, I have the context of what it is that I want to trigger, and that gets populated for me automatically. Okay. Something else that's something useful to think about is that in a lot of cases, users will utilize some of the functions that we have available. And one example, this example here would be date functions, but there are a lot of different functions that we have that get utilized fairly commonly, and date's a good example. A lot of legacy applications require date inputs, and they're in a standard format, and there's a standard set of dates that you use, today's date, first business day of the month, next business day, last business day of the month, those kind of things, right? And you can use the functions to generate those, but if you use them in every task, it kind of gets a bit onerous. So basically what we're recommending doing is that you can look at setting these up as variables that you can share and have available for other customers to use. So if we just go ahead and look at standard date variables, I filter on. So there's a number here that I use that I've created, and the format depends on what you want. So date, they all start with date underscore, so that it's obvious what they are. So current day will return the current day in year, month, day format. And you can see that we're using the functions here. Now, some of the functions are straightforward, but some of the functions, such as where I'm calculating the total business days in the current month, which I want to use as an input for certain processes, require me to do a calculation on dates between the first and last day of the month, right? So I'm using a number of different functions. So this can get a little, complex. We've sorted this out. We've done it once, and the users can leverage doing that. So useful little tip there, that some of the functions that are more commonly used could be exposed as variables that just make it easier for your users to use those within the different task workflows and activities that they're doing. Okay. All right. So something else that we introduced relatively recently, actually in the last release or the current release, was as a simulate function. And one of the useful things that this can be used for is actually when you want to validate use of things like functions within a script. So let's say you're using these date functions within a script, and you just want to make sure that they resolve correctly, that you've understood the documentation and that you've coded it correctly, but you want to do that without actually running the script. Okay, you do that using the simulate function. And this little demo also leverages the capability that the option we set earlier to expose resolve script. Okay, so if we go to a task here, and I use this to set up all those date functions, and it's this one here. So this could be any script, and typically, within a task, and if we scroll down, I've got a script, and this is just printing. So it wouldn't matter if I ran this, because all it's doing is printing them. But if this was a real script that actually executed programs and had dates as variables input to that, I wouldn't want to execute it while I'm validating that the date's going to come out as expected. Okay. So what I can very simply do with any task definition now is I can just very simply go ahead and I can either actually go and check the simulate box, save it, and launch it. Okay. But if I actually go for launch with variables, I have the option to set the simulate option for this one run. Okay. And if I go ahead and launch that, okay, that's gonna execute the task, but it's not going to do anything. There's no activity with the agent. Oh. Now, one of the things it does do, and this highlights another benefit of the simulate, is it will simulate resolving the agent that it runs on. So although it's not actually going to run it on the agent, it's actually gone to an undeliverable status. So let me go and fix that because I stopped that agent to create the failure in the earlier demo. So we'll go ahead and start that up. And I'm doing that off screen, so you can't see that, but there we go. Okay. So that should eventually go into a run status as that agent comes online. Okay, so we can see that. I know the other activities ran and run. My backup worked successfully. And we can go ahead and retrieve the output for that. Now, there's no output because it didn't run on the agent. But because I resolved the script, we can see all those functions resolve. So when I was setting up those variables, I found this useful that I could go through and make sure that, yeah, I get today's date, I get tomorrow's date, I get yesterday's date, first of the month, last day of the month, first business day of next month, which isn't the first of the month, and so on and so forth, number of current days. So we're on the 20th workday of this month. We've got 22 workdays total in this month, those kind of things. I could validate that that was all sensible and what I needed to do within the environment by your combination of using the simulate and a combination of exposing the script, the resolve script, so that I see that in the output. So I see that exposing the resolve script as a useful function. Would recommend turning that on so that you see that. The reason it's turned off by default is that there may be things in your script that are sensitive in nature that you don't want to have as part of the output. That's fine. That's kind of your choice as to how you do that. But I find that very useful, particularly as I use a lot of variables within scripts. And it's just nice to see how everything resolves specifically, or especially if I have problems with that. Okay. So that was the last one we had today. We've got a lot more in the pipeline, but again, I'd encourage you to, give us the opportunity to highlight things that you found useful or that you use in the product that just may not be things that certain other users know about or use on a regular basis. And give us that information, because I think we'd like to do 2 or 3 more of these little tips and tricks webinars, because we think it's a useful thing for people to have. So let's go and see if we have any questions that have come out. So on the Q&A, we have some questions that have come in. So I'm going to read these out and attempt to answer them. And the first one here is, will there be a user preference to view top to bottom windows instead of left to right? And the answer to that is no. That is not, we're not taking that step backward to put in the view that we had previously. There were, it's kind of a complicated topic. There were a lot of discussions at the time when we went through the UI designs, but we had a lot of very, very good reasons for changing the layout of the view. And we're kind of sticking with that. So it's not an option from that side. So I'm assuming that user preferences need to be configured at the environment system level. Yeah, in each system. So basically, if you have a number of different environments like a prod and a QA, yes, you will, because they're stored in the database. The system preferences and the environment preferences don't need to be configured in a high availability node. So if you've got a clustered environment, you don't have to log on to both and set them, because again, they're stored in the database from that side. But yes, you can go ahead and do that. So you have to do that in each environment. And you may want to have different preferences, certainly at the system level, for the different environments in any case. When creating a new task from a workflow, can we take an existing task as a model so then most of the fields are already filled? Not currently. But that raises an interesting point, actually. That could be a very useful enhancement to have a new copy where you select an existing task and create a copy of it directly from within the workflow editor. That's something we'll give some consideration, because yeah, I see that as being a useful option. Next question is, I have a task that accepts parameters. Is there a way to place this task into the workflow with different parameters? And yes. So I think the question there is that you want to have the same task in a workflow more than once and have each instance within that workflow have different parameters. The short answer is yes. There's a couple of different ways to do it. Not something I have time to cover in today's session, though. And I'm not sure. I probably have an example set up somewhere, but I don't have it to hand. So rather than watch me scramble around, I think we'll take that as input for a tip for the next session. I'll also follow up with the individual and send him some pointers, because obviously he'll want to get that information before we can do that. Can we set the tab order via a system-wide default? Not currently, although that's a good idea, and something that may well be useful to have that either as a user preference, so you can do it for all of the definitions there, or you can set that as with a system default. So we'll take that into consideration. Can I add a note to any task which is running in a workflow, for example? Yes, so there is a notes capability within the tasks, within the definitions, where you can add things like the run book instructions or whatever. So if we go ahead and just select a task, let's just do it in the tab here. Oh, actually, no, we'll go ahead and do it. Let's open it in its own tab. Give it a second, open, and you'll see there's a notes tab. Okay, so you can add notes. So multiple notes. So, one could be labeled rerun instructions. And you've got some text here. And you can then add different things here, right? So yes, you can have notes available there. Okay, sorry, just catching where I am on the questions. Would it be possible to use this show resolve script at the task level? Currently, it's not possible, but again, that's interesting and actually, could make sense. That's something I have to discuss with the developers, what the potential overhead of that is. But I don't see, potentially yes, that could be a checkbox that we supply to override that at the task level. Don't see why not. So we'll take that on board as a requirement there. Can you show how to update multiple tasks? Sure, why not? Let's do that. So, okay, let's grab these tasks. So these are all related tasks. So I'm going to highlight tasks here, right? So I want to make the same update to these. Let's say that I want to add them. They should all be part of the DataOps business service. Let's say that I want to add them to an additional business service as well. Simply do a right click and an update on those I selected, and I can do an update on filtered as well. So if it's more than the one screen's worth. So basically all of the things that it makes sense to do here are available. Okay, so if we scroll down till we find member of business services, if I wanted to clear that field, okay, I could check the clear field value and then update, and it would clear that field. In this case, if I just click on it, it allows me to do the edit. So we'll also add that to the QA Ops business service. And it was in the data ops there, and we'll just do an update. Okay. And you can now, hopefully, if we select that guy, should refresh it, you should see it's now also in that. So yes, we've done a mass update. So that's how that works. We can also do update filtered, which is the same thing. So that will do all the records, not just the ones I can see here. And it pops up to say, are you sure? Because that could be a very large number. So it gives you that option if you've accidentally done that to bail before you start making changes to it. Okay, see what we've got in the next questions. Next question, I'm not sure I follow, so I'll follow up separately with that. Is it possible to disable the sending of emails when updating a variable from a task? Yeah, I need a little more information for that, so we'll follow up separately that. Again, I'm not following the next question. Option to launch a task with variables is an option within a workflow, for example, within the connector definition. Oh, is that within the workflow editor? If that is the case, that is actually something that we're adding in the next release, 7.5, an option to do launch with variables from there. So one of the things with launch with variables is that, yes, you've got the option here, launch with variables. We don't see the option here, it's just launch task. But actually, if we were, if we were looking at a specific task, oops, yeah, I thought I had one open. For the workflow monitor, we don't have that availability here. It will be added here, but you have the capability from within the definition itself to do a right click, and that does give you the launch with variables. So it's pretty much available almost everywhere, will be available everywhere. So you have that option from that side. There'll be some other additional controls coming around that, but that's kind of future, which was not the purpose of this discussion today. When that release gets closer to, we'll be talking about those things there. We've got lots and lots of questions, which is good. We've still got some time on here. I'll try and go through as many of these as I can. Can we add the labels in the workflow, same as notes variables? By labels, are we talking tags? If we're talking tags, that is something we're considering. We're looking at having an additional layer of being able to categorize definitions. So the answer is yes, that's something we do want to do within the product there. Is it possible to start tasks in a Kubernetes cluster on several worker nodes? Should be. Cluster broadcast would be the thing to look at there, is basically have those nodes registered to a cluster and then have that cluster be a broadcast cluster. Then when you start the task to that cluster, it'll broadcast, it'll run on every node that's in that cluster. That should be the way that you can handle that. And again, that's useful input for future tips and tricks where we'll go through that in more detail. Another requirement here, recurring tasks will be useful if you configure with start date and end date with an interval. Any thoughts on this? No immediate thoughts, but sounds reasonable. So we'll take that as input. I'll look into that. Question about the inserting task into an active workflow current instance. Assuming this is a temporary change for that instance only, that is correct. Yes, that is only for that instance. Obviously, if you want to make a permanent change, you need to do that within the definition. But you may have cases where you've got a workflow that's already launched but not run, and you get a request in to add a task to that, and you also want to do it for the current run. Then you can also achieve that for the instance that was already launched, as well as putting it into the workflow. Okay, this one's a question. Somebody's trying to do something with S3 passkey IDs with variables. Not sure what the problem is. I'll follow up separately on that one. Okay. Can we control the text color in the banner? Yes, I believe. Or good question. I can't remember. So this is one we'll just go ahead and have a look at. So if we go into administration and properties, and we'll just search for color and see what we've got. I don't recall because I don't change it. Banner background color. Okay. Identify background color. Doesn't look like it. Okay. That would be a useful thing to do because obviously if you want to have the banner as a dark color, the light text doesn't help you. So okay, I'll take that on board. Gosh, lots and lots of questions. They're coming fast and thick. Okay. Okay. There's a few questions here I need to do research on. I don't know. Sorry, just going through things that I can answer quickly within the time available here. It's great that we're getting all these questions, but are you considering a valid from, valid to, which we talked about before, similar to the question we had earlier? Again, in what context? Because for tasks here, we have execution restrictions, which effectively does that. All I gotta do is find it within a workflow, right? So we can set it to be which gives you a valid from, valid to. The use case may be different, so this may not be answering the question. So this is, I can set a task not to be executed within a workflow for a certain period. So that allows me to introduce a new task into a workflow, make the change now, but have that change only be effective from a future date. Okay. So that's certainly an option there, workflow execution restrictions that we have, and there are execution restrictions available for triggers and things where you can turn them off without disabling them and things like that. So that may be what we're looking for. May not be, but that's a good attempt to answer that question. Any plans to add deletes to bundles? Valid question. Yes, we're aware of that limitation. So the scenario there is that when we promote a bundle and a task has been deleted, that deletion doesn't happen on the target system. Number of good reasons why. However, that should be a solvable problem, or at least a configurable solvable problem. So yes, we do have an item open to look at that and investigate a solution for that. So yes, we plan to try and support that if we can. Question about generating reports. I think we can cover that in another session. That could be quite a lengthy topic. So we'll skip there. System identifier color controls the banner text. You see, I've got somebody looking out for me. So the question I couldn't answer. System identifier background color. Does that cover it? Oh, system identifier color. Okay. Well, let's set it to blue and see what happens. So that'll answer the question previously that I wasn't sure of. Yeah, it changes the system identifier, not necessarily all of the colors there, but okay, partial answer to that question, but thank you for that. Can we copy tasks from one environment to another without using bundle and promote? Yes. Although I guess the big question why you don't want to use bundle and promote, maybe the systems aren't connected, fair enough. So relatively recently, we added an option, the right-click option, to do download. And that effectively generates, and you can multi-select on this, that generates a zip file which contains the JSON API format of the definition. You can basically upload that from, so download that. It's generated a download file. It's a zip file format. You can unzip it. You can play with the data, but then you have an import function where you basically point it to the directory that contains that zip file, and that could be a different system. So that would be a way of doing that using the download upload. I wouldn't recommend. You could also doing it. There is an export function, okay, which has been around for a while. Okay, it's here. Export works on selected, which allows you to put it in the XML format. I wouldn't recommend that because that's basically the bulk the import export format, the import export functionality, shall we say, is kind of a brute force method to get definitions in. It's great for doing a full backup of a system and a restore when you do like an upgrade and you want to do a backup and a restore, that's that kind of thing. However, it doesn't do security validation. It doesn't give you an audit trail. There's kind of lots of downsides to it. So using the download and the upload, that's the same as doing it through the user interface or the API. So you're going to get an audit trail that it was uploaded. You're going to get security. Do I have authority to create a definition with those attributes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's definitely the recommended way. And it's also not an administrator function with the import export or the export import. That's a system function and requires you to have the system role. Whereas the upload download basically just requires you to have access to the definition. So preferred way of doing it from that side. So we're going to take one more question. We're right at time. There's been a lot of questions. Appreciate that we haven't got to all of them. In fact, do we have another question that I haven't? There's a couple I've skipped over for various reasons, and I apologize. I will follow up with everyone. Another quick question that came in: could I use the download to compare between dev, UAT, and prod environments? If you have a tool that will compare the JSON files, yes. But there's obviously manual effort involved in that. That is also something that we are looking at. It's somewhere in the priority list, is providing a comparison function. However, I don't have any firm times on that. We understand that, that's a useful capability. But yeah, I haven't worked out where that is in the list of priorities at this point, but we'll be possibly discussing that when we get to planning the next project, which will be the project after the one that you'll see next, which is the one we're currently working on, the 7.5. But we're going to call it. We're almost right at time. We'll give Lauren time to come in and do the wrap up, and appreciate everyone's attention. It's been really helpful and gratifying to have so many questions, because it means that, this has obviously been useful or of interest, which is always our goal.
Yes, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. And at the end of this webinar, you'll get a pop-up for a survey. So please add any additional tips and tricks that you'd like to see in the next webinar, and let us know what you thought of this one. Appreciate all of you here, and we will be sending out the recording later today and publishing it on stonebridge.com early next week. Thank you, everyone. Talk soon.
Okay, have a good day, everyone.